10-ish tips to help make your life easier / beginner mistakes to avoid in Path of Exile 2. Having played through the full campaign on my first character, the Monk, progressing well into the endgame now as well, I've got a pretty good grasp of the game, with my own personal list of what I wish I knew at the beginning and which pitfalls to avoid. I made a new character, a warrior, specifically to use that footage for this video to help avoid spoilers where possible, but there might be a few. Tip 1. Showing a mini health bar above your character and above the enemies as well, giving you a quick visual representation of HP levels whilst you're actually in the action. To enable one or both of these, open up your options, head over to the third tab called Interface, scroll down a little over halfway until you get to Gameplay, and you'll see the option to check Show Mini Life Bar above you. Beneath that is Show Mini Life Bar above NPCs. In the drop down here, you can select enemies or enemies and allies, whichever you like. The mini HP bars above enemies only show up once they've actually sustained some damage, so you are getting that immediate information without there being too much visual clutter all the time. Tip number 2. What to sell, salvage, or disenchant back in camp, and why. Gear will drop for you in a variety of rarities. Normal gear, which is white, magic gear, which is blue, rare, which is yellow, and then unique, which is orange. You can sell all of these for gold. Minus your uniques, just stash those, they're rare enough as it is. Generally speaking, identifying gear will fetch a better price. In the early game, to build up your gold reserves, that might be the play. But as you start to progress, you may want to explore disenchanting instead, destroying the items in return for crafting shards, 10 of which will transform into an orb. Blue's giving you transmutation, which upgrades a normal item to magic item with 1 modifier, and yellow's giving you regal, upgrading a magic item to a rare item with 1 more modifier. Regal orbs are going to be super useful to you, so if you're not hurting for gold, be sure to balance out selling them or disenchanting them for regal shards as well. And that just leaves us with salvaging. Any gear, including white common rarity, with sockets and or with a quality percentage upgrade on it, can be salvaged down for those upgrade mats, receiving the respective upgrade mats from the corresponding gear. Armor from armor, weapons from weapons. From the socketed gear you get the Artificer's shards, 10 of which will turn into an orb, which when used will create a socket on your gear. Look for socketed or quality gear from vendors, especially if it's affordable to you at the time, to get some quick and easy upgrade mats. Bringing us neatly to the next one. Tip number 3. Upgrade your gear. The game is going to be consistently punishing and difficult throughout your journey, throughout your progression. Improving and powering up your gear is something you're going to have to keep on top of in order to get through. Orbs of transmutation, augmentation, regal orbs, exalt orbs, these are all super useful. And the flat increases on the base stats by using those armorer scraps or those whetstones. They make an enormous difference, it all adds up. Maybe not straight out of the gates right at the beginning of Act 1, but as you're progressing through, particularly as you feel like you're coming across walls, gear upgrades will make a tremendous difference, including simply picking up the next level tier of gear and turning it from a normal to a magic. You'd be surprised. Do take care that socketing runes is currently permanent. Tip number 4. Check the additional objectives on the map. There may be a mini-boss or a particularly good treasure that you haven't quite done in an area which you sped through. If an icon is unlit, that means you've already done it, but if it's still lit, that means you haven't completed it yet. The icons to really look out for are the ones that have a plus indicator next to them, meaning that this additional objective provides a permanent stat increase, ranging from elemental resistances all the way to passive skill points. You do not want to miss these. None of them are points of no return, so if you haven't got it yet, just go back and grab it. Tip number 5. Your Ascendency choice is currently permanent. When you get to the point of picking your Ascendency for your character, which is like your class specialization, this is currently a permanent choice that cannot be undone. So when you come to make the choice, really take your time, read through all of the skill nodes for either Ascendency, and if you're at all unsure, do not commit to it until you are ready. The individual passive skill points can be respec'd once you've selected your Ascendency, however switching Ascendancies cannot be done. Tip number 6. How to make sure that your weapon is actually better. There are a lot of modifiers on gear with percentages and numbers, and sometimes it's a bit confusing. Apparently my cat agrees. With your skills tab open showing you your average DPS of the abilities, swap your new weapon with your current one and take a look at what happens to the DPS values. They might change in ways that you weren't quite expecting. Something you thought was weaker is actually better, and vice versa. This might not work for everything such as minions, but for the most part this is a really solid indicator. Tip number 7. Your stash and gold totals are shared amongst all of your characters. If you're ever planning on trying out different classes, playing multiple characters, which you absolutely should, it's awesome, any gear you find which isn't quite for your class but could be really good for something else, can be stashed away for another character. They'll still have to meet the respective level and stat requirements, of course, but otherwise it's not character bound in any way. The obvious one here is for uniques, but you'll also really feel it for stuff like rings and pendants. And having full access to all of your gold to just use the shops as you see fit is super helpful. If you do want to play a new character but you don't want these benefits, you can select solo self-found when you're selecting the league, disabling all player trading and shared stash. Tip number 8. Use your uncut skill gems freely. If you're at all panicking about whether this is a finite resource or some sort of permanent mistake or anything like that, have no fear. These can be farmed and you can use them as and when you need them, particularly on your main skills that you're finding that you're using the most, and of course any other skills that you want to try out. Keep in mind that these are not character bound, so like with your other gear, if you stash these uncut skill gems, they can indeed be used by other characters you make. Tip number 9. Check the non-recommended support gem skills as well. The recommended options are excellent and of course should be utilized. However, when you're using an uncut support gem on a specific skill, you can toggle show all. The interface is slightly different depending on if you're on controller or keyboard and mouse, but if you're looking at the specific skill, the show all will show you skills that work with it. And there are some excellent options for consideration here, particularly useful if you're playing any sort of hybrid build, or you just want to stray away from the recommended stuff. Do pay attention to the additional support requirements and the cost multipliers, as that might be a barrier to using the support gem rather than anything else. Tip number 10. Using a skill with a specific weapon set. You can make use of 2 active weapon sets, maybe a one-hand and a shield, and a big chunky two-hander. But it could also be a staff with ice damage or a staff with thunder damage. Over on your skills, with controller, select skill options, and with keyboard and mouse, just hit the arrow to the side of the DPS, and then toggle which weapon set you want the skill to use. During combat, your character will automatically switch to and from the toggled weapon set for the particular skills. So that isn't something that you have to micromanage, it'll just do it by itself. Mad useful if you've got a really powerful weapon which is great for some skills, and absolutely dog water for others compared to your main choice. Tip number 11. Use upgrade orbs freely. Similar to number 3 with properly powering up your gear as you're going. Here I'm talking about all of them with Transmutation, Augmentation, Regal and Exalt, but really with somewhat of a focus towards the magic ones, and the alchemy orbs that turn normal white common gear to rare with 4 modifiers on. If your gear upgrades are only taking place whenever you happen to find a rare, either as a drop or available from a merchant, and it happens to be right for your class with all the modifiers that you were looking for specifically for your build, you're never going to end up actually getting upgrades. Your gear will not keep up with the content and you will get your face smashed. You'll turn into Exile chutney. Instead, if you find a blue with 1 or 2 great modifiers on it, use the Orbs of Augmentation to maximize the magic modifiers on. If it's still looking good, pop a Regal on it, turn it rare, see what happens. Have you picked up a normal piece of gear with some quality percentage on, and maybe 1 or 2 sockets as well? Run it through with an Alchemy Orb, see what you get out. All quality levels of gear can have some use, which I really love about Path of Exile 2. My final thoughts to wrap this up: as you're progressing through the game, make sure that you explore the areas fully. You never know what's behind a corner. An uncut skill gem in a vase, a rare mob dropping your next big weapon upgrade carrying you through the next 10 levels. Use your upgrades freely, including purchasing from the merchants. Don't wait for some obscure ethereal time in endgame when you're going to finally use this stuff. And lastly, whilst I always encourage experimentation and self-discovery, it does pay to plan ahead. It'll save you time and resources in the future. I'm not saying have everything mapped out, but an idea of where you want to go will help. That's everything I've got for you. If you enjoyed the video, do subscribe for more Path of Exile 2, and I will see you in Rayclast.